Does that all make sense? That was like a super, super quick overview of where we are, but just to try to get us on the same page. Okay, so today we're going to talk about stage 3. Today's probably one of my favorite classes to teach because it's very interactive and we get to do some creative exercises. And I feel like being creative or being able to take some of the negative energy of the recovery process and transmute it or channel it into some creative outlet is a good way to start using that energy, right? You guys have the workout room, and we often talk about how good it feels to go and be physically active or to get outside and walk. That's a great way to kind of channel that energy. But that might not be your gig for whatever reason. So today we're going to work on some creative exercises to kind of channel that energy into something else. Okay? So let's start. No? Nothing? All right. Stage 3, integrate your traumatic experience. So who's had a traumatic experience? Everybody has, right? Let's break that down a little bit and discuss what that actually means. I do not. Who's got a pen for Cody?
I got a bunch of them.
Very good. Yep. So what does it mean if an experience is traumatic for you?
Anything less than nurturing.
Anything less than nurturing? That's an interesting way to phrase it. Sure. What else?
Anything that's going to cause long-lasting emotional, have a negative impact.
Yeah. So it sticks around.
Emotional and or physical, right?
Sure. Yeah. Absolutely.
Okay.
Probably all the above.
Could be psychological and spiritual as well.
Yeah, right.
Yep. Anything else?
That would take up great losses.
Mm-hmm.
And all of that, all four of those.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So again, there's like clinical ways to define that, but the way that I think about it is something happened to you and you didn't have the skills, tools, or knowledge to navigate it and integrate it successfully, right? We can all think of some bad things that have happened to us that we figured out and knew how to handle in the moment, and that sort of allowed us to complete the cycle. So one example I like to think of is like a car accident, right? A minor car accident. Think like a fender bender, right? So you're driving along, somebody rear ends you. You don't really get injured, but maybe you get shaken up. You get their information, they get your information, your insurance takes care of it. In 2 weeks, you get your car repaired, they get their car repaired. Basically, you go on with your life, right? Might have been scary in the moment, and maybe you were in a little bit of actual danger, but there's nothing that you can't deal with in that, right? So then we could think about other examples, right? We often talk about like if you lose a pet, right? For some of us, that might not be a big deal at all. If your cat dies, you're just like, oh, it's a cat, I'm sad, I process it, life goes on. For others of us, if you have a pet who has been a companion, right, for a long, long time, the loss of that pet is deeply impactful, right? It's like losing a family member. And you might not have the psychological or emotional skills to navigate that in an effective way. So again, there's some kind of long-term effect, right? Your grief carries on beyond the loss of the pet, and you can't figure out how to integrate it, right? That grief stays with you, and in some way, it impedes you from living a fulfilling life, okay? So trauma doesn't have to be this huge, like, big thing that happens. It just has to be something that you don't have the tools and skills to navigate in the moment. It sticks with you, it continues to negatively impact your life. Does that make sense to anybody?
Definitely.
Any questions about trauma? Okay. So that's the shitty part. The good part is getting to the point where you can integrate it, right? So integrating it, and another word that I use often is metabolizing it, right? Where instead of continuing to look at the past and sort of being controlled by the things that happened in the past that continue to negatively influence your life, we're thinking about shifting our perspective and our trajectory. We're trying to bring those things from the past to the present. We're trying to integrate them into our life in the here and now, and then we're going to try and move forward. Not ignoring the things that happened, but understanding that they don't have to continue to negatively impact me today and moving forward. So how might we do that?
Just learning from it, like just simple like, oh, okay, don't do that, or simple like, I don't like how that feels, so it just being aware of it.
Talking about it, right?
Forgive but not forget.
Yep, exactly. Go ahead, say what you said, sir.
Talking about it or writing about it.
Sure, yeah, exactly.
Change the paradigm. So instead of saying, oh, this experience happened to me, change it to where at least I know what that experience can do, or change the outcome, so to speak. Like,
Yeah, shift your perspective.
right, like for instance, I was shot. I wouldn't know at all how much damage or trauma that I could deal with, but now I know, like, it changed. Now I know. Now I'm understanding, like, my body can take so much physical damage.
Mhm.
And so, like, I kind of turned it to where, man, I'm actually stronger than I thought I was.
Mm-hmm.
From the victim to like the champion.
Yeah, exactly.
Finding strength and positive, or
Yeah.
negatives and positives, I guess.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yep. And often when we talk about it, right, like none of us would ever want to, experience something traumatic, right? We would never wish that on ourselves, but that's part of life. So the ability to find some positive meaning or purpose from a traumatic event is actually kind of a pretty high level of thought, right? You really have to do a little bit of work to get from the victim, this happened to me, to a point where it's like, oh, I actually can figure out something positive to derive from this and move on with life. And that's kind of what we're going to talk about today. Integration is learning the lesson, right? Or increasing your self-awareness to the point where you can see that if this hadn't happened, you couldn't be where you are today, right? It's kind of this interesting paradox where you can't heal unless you've been injured, right?
Usually the victim doesn't volunteer to be the victim.
Right, exactly, right? It's not something we ask for necessarily, it's just something that occurs.
It also makes it to where you can say, see you later, sir. I don't need that bullshit. I don't need certain people in my life now. I stronger than that, better than that.
Yeah,
It helps solidify boundaries. Like, okay, I know this is something I don't like.
yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yeah, letting go and boundary setting are huge parts of integrating, right? Because there's some point where you don't want to deal with the negative aspects of what you've experienced anymore. So it's important to make a note here, right? A lot of us get into our addictive behavior as a way of avoiding the bad things that happen to us, right? We want to ignore them, or we want to in some way shift our attention from experiencing them and integrating them and just not deal with it at all. Somebody give me an example. What's a way that you made the choice not to deal with the things that have happened to you?
Like every time I get my heart broken, I just turn to drugs and alcohol, and just pretty blank it out instead of processing it and going through that grievance.
Yeah, so a loss of relationship. Yeah, for sure. What else?
Not dealing with my dad passing away.
Yeah, grief is a huge one, right? Losing someone we love, absolutely.
Embarrassment. Not wanting to be embarrassed about something you've got going on.
Sure.
So, rather than tell somebody to work it out, get out of that zone.
Yeah, and for dudes especially, right? Like any kind of insufficiency, right? Or any kind of like not being enough can be a huge trigger, right? Feeling like you're not good enough, feeling like your self-worth is really low. Yeah, all of
Emasculating.
Say it again.
Emasculating.
Yeah, exactly. Being emasculated.
Not being able to work.
Yeah, not being able to do the things that you want to do.
Got a wife that's working 200 hours a paycheck because I can't cope with being there at the moment.
Yeah. So, again, just to bring us to the here and now, you guys all have a ton of experience around this, right? And it's really kind of a unique situation where we can all be in the same room and kind of share some of that stuff and acknowledge that to get to the point where you are now, you guys have survived all of that, right? And not only have you survived it, but you're here because you made a choice that you want to figure out a different and hopefully better way of navigating that stuff, right? Sure, not using, right, is a great part of sobriety. If you're not drinking and you're not actively using, you'll be a healthier person, for sure. But if you don't also get to the root of why you started using in the first place, there's always going to be more work to do. I mean, there's always going to be more work to do regardless, but I want to be clear in that taking that first step and stopping what you're doing is the way that you get access to working on the root of the problem. Does that make sense?
Yes.
If you take away that filter of whatever addictive substance we've been using, and you start to get to the point where you have a little bit of a clear mind in early sobriety, you have an opportunity to delve into all of that stuff and increase your self-awareness, and then start to build up tools and skills and knowledge that will help you address that in a meaningful way. And that's what we're going to kind of talk about today. So one of my, I use a few different like theoretical orientations when I do counseling and therapy with clients. One of my favorite ways is narrative therapy. Does anybody know what narrative therapy is?
You're putting your stuff in story form?
Yeah, exactly. Basically like taking your specific experience, sort of taking it from your internal world and externalizing it. So an easy way to think about this is just journaling, right? You have thoughts, you ruminate on them, you can write them down, and now you have some tangible record about what you've been thinking and feeling. And you can reflect on that, right? You can look back on a daily or weekly basis and see what you've been thinking and what you've been feeling. And then you can start to construct some kind of pattern, and then you can look at themes. And if you do it for a long time, you can see how you transformed from where you were to where you are today. So we're going to practice that a little bit today. And I think it's valuable just for the reasons that I've mentioned, right? That in active addiction, it may feel like we don't have a lot of control over our story, right? It may feel like the universe is just shitting on us, right? It may feel like all of these things are happening to us and we're just kind of floundering. Narrative therapy gives us an opportunity to kind of let some of that go. And this isn't about control, but it's about developing your sense of self. It's developing the power within you to be in charge of how you exist and what your story is. Okay, so we'll get into step 7, and we'll probably make it through step 7 before the break, and then we'll do 8 and 9 after snacks. Okay, so here's what I want you guys to write down. I want you to make 3 columns on the paper that you have. And those 3 columns are going to be labeled departure, initiation, and return. So remember, again, those are sort of like the 3 aspects of...
How you spell, sorry to interrupt you.
That's all right, go ahead.
How you spell initiation?
I-N-I,
Hold on. I-N-I?
T-I-A, T-I-O-N.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I didn't hear 3.
That's okay. Departure, initiation, return. Okay, so we're just going to do some really basic practice first before we jump into the bigger exercises. Because I want you guys to start thinking about how some of the dots in your story connect. Okay? And again, when we talk about this, it may feel like things are very linear, like, you know, just in a straight line. I'm well aware that that's not how life works. So I invite you to kind of play with some of the complexity in your head. And what I mean by that is, like, when I was in active addiction 10 years ago, I had no imagination that at some point I would be in a room like this, teaching a class like this with a master's degree, right? But those things are connected, right? I was in active addiction, I went through a bunch of grief, lost people that I loved, decided to get sober, decided to go back to school, decided to pursue counseling, and now here I am, right? So looking at it, it may be challenging for some people to see how those things are connected, and it's definitely not a straight line, right? But I couldn't get to where I am today if I hadn't done those things that I did 10 years ago. So that's what I'm kind of wanting you guys to do, okay? So with your piece of paper, we're just gonna take 5 minutes, and I just want you guys to write down a couple, maybe 4 or 5 examples where you have a departure in your life, you experience some kind of initiation, and then there's a return. You've transformed into someone different. And again, we talked about some examples earlier. Could be you moved out of your parents' house, that's the departure. You got your first job, and the 2-week training was the initiation, and the return was getting your first full-time job and working and paying your bills, right? That's a very super simple example. You guys understand what I'm asking?
Yeah.
Okay, so take 5 minutes. I want you to write out 4 or 5 examples of those 3 columns, and then
Maybe you
we'll,
don't have to be in chronological order.
no, not at all. No, just whatever comes up for you. Okay, take 5 minutes. Ready, set, go.